Shinawy are going to have a talk show that we call the Shinaway Show. So as we usually have in Hunter MSA events, you can text any questions you have to the number on the screen, and inshallah after 8 p.m. the shuyukh will discuss and answer any questions that you guys might have. So inshallah, we have a recitation by Brother Zawar Ahmed.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل الحمد لله وسلام على عباده الذين اصطفى الله خير عما يشركون أمن خلق السماوات والأرض وأنزل لكم من السماء ماء فأنبتنا به حدائق ذات بهجة ما كان لكم أن تنبتوا شجرها أإله مع الله بل هم قوم يعدلون أمن جعل الأرض قرارا وجعل خلالها أنهارا وجعل لها رواسي وجعل بين البحرين حاجزا أإله مع الله بل أكثرهم لا يعلمون أمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء ويجعلكم خلفاء الأرض أإله مع الله قليلا ما تذكرون أمن يهديكم في ظلمات البر والبحر ومن يرسل الرياح بشرا بين يدي رحمته أإله مع الله تعالى الله عما يشركون.
Jazakallah khair, Brother Zawar. Beautiful recitation, mashallah. Sheikh Muhammad al-Shinawi graduated with a bachelor's in English literature from Brooklyn College, studied a bit at the Islamic University of Medina, and is currently studying at the Islamic University of North America. He is also the Dawah Director at NGB, also known as Muslims Giving Back. So without further ado, Sheikh Muhammad al-Shinawi. Sheikh Muhammad al-Shinawi. So as per Sheikh Muhammad Shinawi's request, we have a video that he'd like us to show.
Brainwash complete. You have been systematically programmed to hate Islam, hate Islam, hate Islam. You've been conditioned to blame religion through image cognition. I can make you bark like Pavlov's dog. Excuse me. I can make you bow to man-made gods. Repeat what you see. Error, error. Repeat after me. Fear, terror, terror, extreme. Fear them, free the freedom. American dream. Woman in a scarf, bomb. Man with a beard, bomb. Jihad, Islam. The war on terror, error, delete. Brainwash complete. You've been hypnotized, made to believe that Muslims are not civilized. You don't even realize it, but you have justified genocide. Kill them all, kill them all. Savage, your entire country is collateral damage. The real problem is the national debt. Error, Muslims are a national threat. Do me a favor and don't think for yourself. Just pay taxes if you really want to help. The people in power have this all under control, and you should be worried about the Super Bowl. Did you hear that interception on your cell phone? Error, did you see that interception in the end zone? Patriots win, Patriots win. That's a subliminal message. Should I say it again? East versus West. And the media is worse than a cheating ref, as more Patriots touch down for a game of sudden death. But let's play with the lives of innocent people. Another epic battle of good against evil. The music is deadly and the media is lethal. Big Brother is watching, and believe me, he sees you. Program after program, you are being subconsciously programmed. Sitcom after sitcoms, bombs drop as you sit calm. Let's go out to the theater for an incredible experiment, era experience. Filling up the eyes with lies, while taking the lives of humans to see how long you just sit there and let their lives be ruined. We've successfully desensitized an entire generation through movie and video game simulation, and overstimulation is an open invitation to blow up entire nations. Sex-driven society, who cares about Gaza? It's almost time to prepare for the Oscars. Who's your nomination for movie of the year? You cry over fiction, but real life doesn't move you to tears. Your eyes have been blinded and your hearts are numb. Your ears cannot hear, you are deaf and dumb. And it's just the beginning before you realize what we've done. Most of your generation will be dead and gone.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. We begin in the name of Allah, the most merciful, the grantor of every mercy. All praise and glory belongs to Allah, Lord of the worlds. Indeed, Allah is deserving of the best of thanks and the most beautiful of praises, those that we say and far above anything we can say about Him. And we testify that none is worthy of worship but Allah alone, Almighty God, the creator of the heavens and the earth, the true supreme King. And the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, was indeed, certainly his prophet and his servant and his messenger. To begin, welcome everybody to tonight's event discussing Sharia. We are truly privileged, truly honored to have with us tonight, alhamdulillah, an accomplished pediatrician and alhamdulillah, doctorate in Sharia as well. Someone that is beyond near and dear to our hearts, Dr. Hatim al-Hajj. If he can join us, it would be good. This is not over, by the way. Even though there will be giveaways at the end of the night, so do stay tuned, inshallah, to the end of the evening. Yeah, so you're supposed to do this, right? Bismillah. Everyone knows that as Muslims living as a minority in the West, it is an obligation on us for our own sakes to begin with, and to refine our narrative and our explanation to others in a way that is true to our tradition, but resonates well with, the language of the age, the culture of our time and place. One of perhaps the most central subjects that is under attack and requires clarification is the subject of Sharia itself. So Shaykh, we promise that we're not going to shy away from any questions, but let's just begin, from the ground up, just to recalibrate a little bit some concepts. When the word Sharia is brought up, obviously, to many people, the very first thing that comes to mind is the Penal Code. So how off the mark is that? What does Sharia actually mean?
Sharia actually means the path to the water body, where you get water from, or it could mean the water body itself. And that's the literal meaning of Sharia. In the sense of Islamic sciences, Sharia is the entire body of Islamic teachings, which does not only pertain to law, but it also includes spirituality, and includes ethics, manners, everything, all the Islamic teachings, regardless of the area or the specialty. All the Islamic teachings are under the umbrella of Sharia. So when we talk about Fiqh, we're talking about the law in particular. But when we're talking about Sharia, we're talking about the entire body of Islamic teachings, including spirituality, including your belief in God, and your belief in the hereafter, your belief in the unseen. All of this is under the umbrella of Sharia, including morality, purification of the heart, the code of ethics for us Muslims, how we basically interact with the creation, how we interact with the Creator, more importantly, and with the creation, and our self-conduct as well. All of this is under the umbrella of Sharia. So it's law, morality, and spirituality, whereas fiqh will only apply to law.
And would it be correct to use the word Sharia with regards to our theology as well? Our belief systems? I sort of included this under spirituality. It is the theology of Islam, the belief in God, the belief in the hereafter, the belief in the unseen. All of the tenets of belief are considered part of Sharia. So the difference between Sharia and Fiqh would then be what?
Well, there are different levels of differences between Sharia and fiqh. Sharia is basically whatever Allah has prescribed for us. شَرَعَ لَكُم مِّنَ الدِّينِ مَا وَصَّى بِهِ نُوحًا. He prescribed for you in religion that which is similar to what He prescribed to Noah, or that which is what He prescribed to Noah, literally, meaning that the Sharia is Allah's prescription. As Allah revealed it, basically the intent of the legislator is considered here. Our perception of Sharia is the body of laws that we call fiqh. So fiqh is our perception of what Allah had prescribed. So fiqh would overlap with Sharia when fiqh, or when the different scholarly positions are correct, then they overlap with Sharia. When the scholarly positions are incorrect, then they do not represent Sharia. Although from your perspective, from your point of view, you will not be able to determine when the scholars were right or wrong as an individual, as like a follower. And even many of the scholars will not be able to determine in all cases where the scholars were right and where they were wrong, because they are mujtahideen, and mujtahid, or expert opinion is not abrogated by another expert opinion. But we know that Sharia is what Allah had intended. The legislation that Allah had prescribed as He intended it. Our understanding of it is our fiqh, is our understanding. That's why fiqh means what? In linguistically, it means understanding. Fiqh is our understanding of what Allah had prescribed. When our understanding is correct, it overlaps with Sharia. When it is not correct, it does not overlap with Sharia. Another difference between fiqh and Sharia is that fiqh is pretty detailed, because that is what people need. People need to learn the details of the rulings. So the rulings, when the scholars basically teach the rulings, they teach them in a very detailed manner. The Sharia in general, which is the divine prescription, comes more in as guidelines, particularly in areas of financial transactions, for instance, because they are very variable. They're basically variable with the variation of time and place and circumstances and so on. Therefore, when the Sharia addresses the area of financial transactions, it addresses them with general guidelines. But for the scholars, in every time, in every place, they do need to provide detailed guidance to the audience, to the basically final consumer. Because if I give general guidelines to the Muslim practitioner, he may not be able to do much with them. So the scholars, detail those guidelines, and the details may not always be applicable in all times and places, which does not mean that the Sharia is not suitable for all times and places, but the detailed explanations of the scholars are the ones that need to be looked at to verify their suitability for the time and place, not the Sharia itself. That would be the fatwa then.
Because we all get this stuff thrown in one lump sum, like Sharia and Islamic law and fatwa all basically means legal edict, chop his head off, right?
Even the law, even the Islamic law, when you think about it, chop his head off, that is that's a very small part of it, and that is when it is warranted. When he chopped off some other head, then that would be warranted. But the idea here is we have the fiqh of worship. These are laws pertaining to how you worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Look at the books that address the fiqh of worship, and look at the size of this section within any fiqh book. The size of this section will be more than 1/3, close to 1/2 of any fiqh book will be about the fiqh al-ibadat, particularly the fiqh books that are based on explanation of hadith in particular. And then you have fiqh of financial transactions, and then you have fiqh of family, and then you have fiqh of customs, you know, vows and oaths and hunting and foods and all of that stuff. And then you have the fiqh of judiciary and penal laws. And within the fiqh of judiciary and penal laws, which is about 1/5 of the fiqh of penal laws is part of this. So that is just to put things in perspective. But all of this is part of Sharia, because Sharia would also include belief, morality, spirituality, in addition to the laws. So that is putting things in perspective. Penal laws would be a very small part of, where by the way, we are proud of the entire Sharia. It's not that we're just trying to basically show disrespect to any part of Sharia. Every part of Sharia is a divine prescription for us, but that is just to put things in perspective.
So it's correct for us to say, just so we can move beyond this point, the Sharia is the religion of Allah as He stated it, as He intended, right? And the fiqh means understanding how we understood the Sharia, but that's subject to not being as flawless because our understanding could be flawed, right?
Yeah, the fiqh is our understanding of Sharia. If you're talking about the fiqh according to the earlier generations, it is our understanding of the entire Sharia, including belief, spirituality, and morality. And if you're talking about fiqh according to the terminology of the latter generations, it is our understanding of Sharia in the area of laws. That is, laws of worship, family, financial transactions, penal laws and judiciary and everything.
And these would be the normal laws, and the fatwa would be something more specific, more tailored to a situation, a time, a place.
Yes, absolutely. But also, if you open the fiqh book and the rulings that are basically detailed by the scholars in fiqh books, these are not all constant. You know, a good portion of them is constant, but some of them are variable because the circumstances vary. And that is where we need ijtihad all the time, you ijtihad all the time to apply the Sharia correctly, so that we're not deviating from the intent of the legislator and the objectives of the legislation.
Okay, I guess that's a good segue. Alhamdulillah, we got the technicality, inshallah azza wa jal, down packed. I hope there are prizes and questions leading off to those prizes later, inshallah. Can we talk a bit about the objectives, or at least the central concepts, or the philosophy behind the Sharia? What are some of the central concepts in the Sharia?
Well, basically, the Sharia it comes at various levels. The most abstract level of Sharia is the level of the comprehensive major objectives of the Sharia. And you will not be able to understand the Sharia unless you understand those objectives, unless you truly understand the objectives and the detailed rulings that stem from those objectives. But concept number one is that the Sharia is a divine revelation. The Sharia is the divine revelation, which gives it not only temporal authority, it also gives it spiritual authority. So a Muslim is abiding by the Sharia because it's what Allah had revealed, it's what Allah had wanted of him, versus abiding by any other set of laws where you abide by them because they're the laws, they're the local laws or the laws of the land. You do abide by them, but when you abide by the Sharia, there is a little bit of extra layer of devotion here. You're abiding by the Sharia, seeking the reward in the hereafter, seeking compliance in this dunya, and seeking also the reward of the hereafter. Secondly, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala legislated for us, for our own well-being, not for Allah's well-being, for the well-being of mankind. So the Sharia was revealed to us for our own interest, for our own benefit. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted this Sharia to protect 5 things for us, to protect our religious commitment, which is extremely important, and it should be extremely important. Basically, that is our relationship with Allah. You do not want to cut off your relationship with Allah. You want to promote it, you want to enhance it. So it should come as number 1. Number 1 is your relationship with Allah. So the Sharia protects your deen, your religious commitment, your relationship with Allah. And then the second thing, right after deen, is life. So the sacredness of life, the sacredness of any sacred life. And the word sacred life does not mean a Muslim life. It means all sacred life. You know, and that is extremely clear and not controversial in the Sharia. The life of dhimmi, the life of dhimmi, meaning the non-Muslims who live in a Muslim land as minorities, as peaceful minorities, the life of anyone who is in a peaceful sort of relationship with Muslims, and that's pretty much the entire world nowadays. All countries of the world are members of the United Nations. That gives all countries of the world the default status of peaceful entities or peaceful countries, because basically the international law and the treaties that all of the Muslim countries, 59 or so Muslim countries, have signed with the rest of the countries of the world stipulate this, that the relationships between all countries will be, you know, relationships of cooperation, peace, and so on and so forth. So we are people who abide by our covenants. Then the Sharia protects, after the Sharia, you know, we said that it protects life, second. And then the third thing that the Sharia will protect is intellect, which has a great importance in Islam. That's why wine is forbidden, for instance, because the Sharia is very keen on protecting intellect. And then the Sharia protects property. And then the Sharia protects honor/lineage. And that is a concept that is also very important and may come up in our discussion, that the Sharia puts a lot of emphasis on honor, because the human being is not a 3D creature only. There is a 4th dimension. The human being is not only width, height, and length, width, length, and depth. So the human being is not a 3D creature. There is a 4th dimension. The human being is a spiritual being in a physical form. The 4th dimension is the spiritual dimension. It is the ego that may not be seen. So the Sharia is very keen on protecting people's honor, people's reputation, and so on. And that is something that you do not find a lot in a lot of positive laws in our times, because what matters is, you know, as long as you're not touching me or not taking my money, you could insult me as much as you want. But that is not true in Sharia. The Sharia also protects that aspect of the human being. And finally, lineage is also protected by the Sharia. That is why there is this emphasis on chastity and propriety, of mixing between the genders, and all of these things.
Jazakallah khairan. So we said religious commitment, life, intellect, honor, ancestry, property, and then honor, ancestry, right? So I'm going to pick on the first one for now, inshallah. Many of us, we grew up in an increasingly secular world. So how can we learn to appreciate the emphasis that the Sharia put on preserving a person's commitment or relationship with his God, with his Creator? What's the worth of that? People ask, what's the practical benefit of religion, spirituality in particular?
Well, the practical purpose of religion is that that's what gives you purpose of life. That is the purpose of your existence. And you can't imagine someone who does not know who his father is would be searching for his father his entire life. People do this, right? You know, people who have doubts about who their father is, or they don't know who their father is. They yearn for knowing who their father is. And it's just their father. Keep in mind that your father was just a cause, you know, that Allah used to bring you to existence. But if someone does not know who made him, who brought him here, who brought him to this existence, who created him, who moved him from the sphere of nothingness, Adam, to the sphere of existence or wujud, that is a person that is extremely lost and is extremely in a pain and anguish, even if you try to cover it up. Even if you try to basically indulge yourself in the enjoyments of life, to forget about those, existential questions that come back to you all the time. Where did I come from? What am I here for? And where am I going? And if you don't have an answer to those questions, you will not have comfort, tranquility, inner peace. You will not feel together. You will not feel whole until you find the right answers to those questions. Now, once you have found the right answers to those questions, would it be important, once you've recognized who your creator is, who your maker is, wouldn't it be important for your salvation in the hereafter and for your prosperity in this life, for your well-being in this life? And well-being in this life is not only about how much money you have in your bank account, and it is not only about how muscular you are. You go to the gym every day. It is, these are very superficial things and external things. Well-being in this life is about that inner peace. It's about your contentment with your purpose of living, your purpose of existence. So you have to moisten and water this relationship with your Lord all the time for your well-being, for your mental and spiritual well-being in this life, and for your salvation in the hereafter. And without recognizing the divine authority, without knowing your God, eventually, and I know atheists would disagree with this, but I have to be very honest, eventually everything will lack purpose. So atheists, for instance, where do they bring morality? Where do they basically judge something as moral or immoral? The concept of morality itself is a metaphysical concept. It is completely beyond the scope of scientific resolution. Can you scientifically determine whether something is moral or not? And then if you can't scientifically determine it, it's like empirical science can't have any say in this, then how do you judge what's moral and what's immoral, what's ethical and what's not? And then the only measuring stick would be what? Whether it works for the society or not. But eventually, why would you be interested in the well-being of the society if the entire existence lacks purpose? Why should you be so interested in the well-being or the welfare of the society? The entire existence has no purpose. We just came from the apes. And then billions of years from now, we may be some other type of creature. We may develop into some other type of creature.
If I might add to that, I find that morality kind of changes based on the society that you live in. So like one country might have a different scope of morality as different than us, right? So like that's kind of also where Sharia can come in.
Okay, that's a very good question. That's called situational morality. Situational morality, and certainly any atheist, whenever an atheist talks to you about like certain aspects of Islamic law or certain aspects of Islamic morality, that is completely contradictory with being atheist. Because at least if you're atheist, then morality there should not be one standard for morality. Because if it is not divinely decreed, then it is basically whatever works for the society. And since societies are extremely different, New Yorkers will be very different from hunters and gatherers and so on. Then the morality must be situational. Islam does recognize a certain degree of this. There are fundamental ethics, fundamental morals that should not be changeable from society to society. And this is where Islam has, puts like a great deal of emphasis on those fundamental morals. The concept of justice, the concept of benevolence or kindness. There are certain things that that must be overriding, overarching. But there are then certain customs that may be, you know, some things may be considered proper in one society and not proper in another society. You know, and although this is still under the umbrella of morality, but it does not touch the fundamental morals. Like hairstyle, for instance, or like attire, may be proper in one society and not proper in another society. There is room here, there is flexibility in Sharia in addressing issues of that nature, considering the differences in societies. But justice should not be different between one society and another society.
Sheikh, we also grew up in a culture that takes that same kind of great pride in protecting such liberties, right? Pursuit of happiness, pursuit of justice, and the likes of these. So why then can't we just live by those universal morals or universal principles? What makes the Sharia so necessary, so unique then?
Absolutely. Al-haq wal-khair wal-jamal, these concepts of, you know, truth and goodness or benevolence and beauty, these are all good things. Al-'adl wal-ikha wal-musawah, justice, brotherhood, and equality, all are good things. However, you need a roadmap to get to those objectives. That is what the Sharia provides. I mean, because all of us agree on these things. All of the people, all you know, capitalists and socialists agree on these things or not? Do they disagree over the path, the roadmap? How do we get to justice, equality, and all of those good meanings? They do disagree. So just in the area of economics, you find like heated disagreements, violent disagreements over the path to those ends, to those great ends that we all agree on. So that is what the Sharia provides. It provides a roadmap. It tells you of the detailed roadmap or the path to those ends. How do you get there? And certainly, human beings, keep in mind that not only that it provides us the tools and the path to get there, but it also describes for us what is justice and what's not unjust, and what is injustice, what is, you know, proper and what's improper. Why is this? Because, like, how do you determine if something is just or unjust? How do you determine that that a particular practice or a particular behavior? The majority of people will determine this. Having the majority change their mind, you know, majority in America, for instance, in our country, here in America, the majority within the one country changed its mind many, many times over the past 200 years, concerning lots of issues. So in this case, human beings are limited by their prejudices and their biases. Human beings, the ability of human discernment, which Islam recognizes, by the way, because Islam recognizes that Allah knows, because He's the one who created us, that He had endowed us with that ability of discernment between right and good. But it is limited. It is confounded, it is limited by our biases, which are so many. And we all agree that we as human beings have a lot of biases and a lot of prejudices that would make our judgment or our ability of discernment between right and wrong and good and evil, you know, impeded to some extent. The Sharia removes that impediment. The Sharia tells you, no, this is right, this is wrong, and this is how you get to that good end, and this is how you avoid that evil end, or that bad end. For instance, if you do not want to be talking about necrophilia and incest, then you should stop much earlier. The Sharia tells you the talk should be about proper mixing between the two genders. The talk should be about even what is halal and what is haram between the two spouses. And if you're mindful of this, you're not going to slip to the bottom of the hill and start to talk about whether necrophilia should be legal or not.
I heard a beautiful quote once regarding this issue, right? Arriving at justice. Ibn al-Qayyim, rahimahullah, the 11th century jurist and theologian, great icon of a scholar of Islam, he said that the Sharia is entirely just and entirely merciful, entirely wise, and whatever departs from that is not Sharia, even if a person might misinterpret the Sharia, thinking so, right? So if it's entirely, every aspect of it is just, I guess this would be a good demonstration as a matter of examples. I have a few examples written down. Entirely just. A person can say, but that's entirely not true. It's clear that Islam, the Sharia, is partial, is prejudiced to men. And they'll cite, for example, that a man will inherit twice as what a woman would inherit in the Sharia, right? And so that's clearly not just. This is the argument.
Okay. And that may be understood at the first glance. If you see that a man takes twice as much as the woman, you may think that this is really unfair. But then you will need to also factor in that the man is required to spend on his sister that does not have a father or does not have a caretaker. Not only his wife later on, but his sister who lost his caretaker, but she's not required to spend on him. And then he will be required also to spend on his wife and his children, whereas his wife is not required to spend. If you say, well, let us just make it all equal, that would be injustice to women. Because what we fail to understand, what we always fail to understand, is that the Sharia was not really prescribed for New Yorkers in the 21st century. And if you demand of women, in agricultural societies to provide for the family, then you get the same amount of inheritance, but you also have the same responsibilities, and you'll have to also provide. If you demand this from women, during times where a lot of income was generated from industries that women would find very hard to partake in, it would not be fair to the women. It would not be fair to the women. So during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, prior to the Islam in Arabia, women did not get anything. If you go to the biblical laws, the eldest male got all the inheritance in the biblical law. So the fact that Islam gave women, and keep in mind that Islam did not always give women half of what he gave men. Sometimes it was like
That's the only one we hear about, though.
Yeah, but also you have to also remember that Islam would give the mother the same as the father in many applications. In many scenarios, the mother would get just as much as the father. So the son may get double the daughter, but the mother will get, in many scenarios, just as much as the father. And the difference here is that she would be as needy as the father, versus the son and the daughter starting to build their lives, and he being responsible.
Does she ever get more?
For, in certain cases, the women get more. In certain cases, women get what men do not get. So basically the maternal grandmother versus the maternal grandfather. She will get, he will not get, if the mother is not present. So in certain cases, he gets a share of the inheritance, whereas her counterpart will not get, her male counterpart will not get a share of the inheritance. It's just that the Sharia looks at things from all aspects at the same time, because the legislator here is God. So he's not limited by any partial thought process or any limitation like us, biases, limitation of wisdom or anything of that nature. And God does not legislate for a particular group of people at a particular time. God legislates for humanity at all times and all places. So you just need to look into it a little bit further, and you will find that you're completely mistaken. I mean, as Muslims, you should never entertain, you should never posit that God is unfair. But the question here is being asked to basically prepare us to prepare us with the answers, in case we get asked questions of this nature.
And they'll say you got away with that one, but what about it being partial to men in marriage? Four women get married to one man, the opposite is not true. A woman can't have 4 husbands. Are you happy? Isn't that partial to men?
Okay.
The argument would be, of course.
The argument always when you talk to people about these issues, don't forget to mention whenever that is applicable, and most of the time it will be applicable. Don't forget to mention that Islam did not really come up with this. Islam did not come up with this. You know, history of humanity in general, let alone the biblical tradition, let alone the prophetic traditions, history of humanity in general, throughout the 3 continents, Europe, Asia, and Africa, before Islam, was polygyny? No, absolutely. Was polygyny widely practiced? Absolutely. That is, regardless of religion here, even if you go to the Animal Kingdom, with a few exceptions, but generally speaking, you don't really look at the exceptions, you look at the default. Generally speaking, even within the Animal Kingdom, you know, one male may have multiple partners versus the female. But if you move a step closer, and you look at the general history of humanity, you know, polyandry has not really been widely practiced in any community, any society that we know of in the history.
Multiple husbands.
Multiple husbands. And then if you move a little bit closer, in the biblical tradition, it is, you know, polygyny is all over the place. You know, so Dawood alayhi salam had 100 wives. Sulaiman alayhi salam had 1,000 between wives and concubines. Ibrahim alayhi salam had 3. All of the prophets of the Old Testament, not all of the prophets, but the majority of the prophets of the Old Testament practiced polygyny. Did the Bible prevent it? How could it be prevented when the prophets who communicated it, who conveyed it, practiced polygyny? So Islam is not new. Secondly, there are multitudes of reasons why polygyny has been prescribed versus polyandry. And at the end of the day, wallahi, even though that we do say that polygamy or polygyny is not advisable where if you live as a minority in a country that criminalizes it. But in terms of the wisdom of the legislation itself, we will continue to defend the wisdom of the legislation because we're defending our religion. I mean, it is utter tyranny to require of me, in order for me to be tolerated, in order for me to be accepted by you, to require of me to give up my religion so that you can tolerate me. I'll tolerate you as long as you give up the Quran. Oh, okay, thank you. Don't tolerate me in this case, if that's the condition. So we will continue to support the wisdom, defend the wisdom of the Sharia of this regard. So defending the wisdom of the Sharia, I say that wallahi, it is in the best interest of women, not men. When did men ever need to marry a second wife to have sex with a second woman? In which society? We know of a lot of societies that don't believe in polygyny, right? We know that the infidelity rates in those societies are like extremely high.
Not in New York City.
Well, no, and I'm not going to even.
You're settlement, okay?
And I'm not going to even cite statistics, but infidelity rates are extremely high. So what are they doing then? What is happening here is that those men are getting what they want without any responsibility. You know, without those women having any rights, or their offspring having any rights of legitimacy, like the first one or the wife. So it is not a matter of allowing men basically to fulfill their needs, because men do fulfill their needs whether, you know, polygyny is legislated, prescribed or not prescribed. Men go out and fulfill their needs if they want to do this, if they seek to do that. But it is a matter of protecting the rights of women. It is a matter of protecting the chastity of the society. It's a matter of protecting the lineage of the children and the rights of the children, making sure that we basically limit the number of children that are born out of the wedlock, that are not given their due right of growing up in normal, conventional families where they are basically cared for by their loving parents, father and mother. In addition to many other things, you know, like because I could take an hour explaining the wisdoms of polygyny. If you want me to do this, I can carry on.
No, feel free. We have at least 15 more minutes. I have one more question, but I want you to finish this.
Okay.
The sisters want the answer really bad.
Okay. Why is it in the best interest of men? Because if a man was unable to fulfill the needs of his wife, guess what? She has the right to separate. Right or wrong? If the man is unable to fulfill the needs of his wife, she has the right to separate from him. In this case, this man may just have to live a bachelor life or marry a woman that is sort of okay or fine with him not being able to fulfill her needs, her various needs. But this is not like a made-up story. This is a real story. I know of this couple. They got married, and 3 months after their marriage, the wife was diagnosed with cancer, a debilitating cancer. And she was expected to live 10, 15 years. However, after this, after a little while, she became completely unable of fulfilling any of the needs of the husband. And in a scenario like this, what do you think would be the best arrangement? What do you, like, his family, keep in mind, they just got married, and 3 months later, she was diagnosed with this terminal illness that made her unable to fulfill his needs. So his family was urging him to divorce her. So let's imagine that this man was in Egypt, for instance, in a country where polygyny is allowed, or lawful. What would be the best scenario? You tell this man to live, almost a celibate life, caring for his sick wife, and taking care of his, work and all of his other obligations, or you tell him that to keep his wife and take care of his wife, continue to take care of his wife, even though they were just married for 3 months. But yes, continue to be faithful to your wife, committed to the marriage, but then you may marry a second woman if you feel that you need to have all of your needs, emotional needs. It's not just physiological or biological, it's also emotional needs and logistical needs, like to have a family and to be taken care of also. So that's a scenario where it shows you it is really not for the man, it is rather for the woman. Do you guys know that throughout the history, except for certain places at certain times, but generally speaking, throughout the history, there is usually a surplus of women. Get the statistics now. But Google it. It's very easy. So Google the census in Germany, for instance, males, females, and so on, or in other places. So there is usually surplus of women.
Especially if the man doesn't necessarily want a woman.
That adds to the problem also. That also adds to the problem.
You missed it. It was once in a lifetime. Sorry. Not every
No. But even if every man was interested in marrying a woman,
still could be an excess.
There would be a surplus of women. And so those women now are, what are their choices? Celibacy, prostitution, or, a second wife.
Suicide.
But forget about
that one. I'm sorry, I set the standard for myself. That one wasn't a joke at all, by the way. It's a very serious matter. But I just mean like emotional breakdown at times.
Yeah,
overdosing.
Yeah.
Jumping.
So, but realistically speaking, if she did not decide to do that, and she decided to carry on with life, so she will live without a partner, or she will live with an illegitimate partner, or she will live as a second with like a man who's married as a second wife, as a co-wife. So what do you choose for her?
And the opposite is not true.
And the opposite is not true. Keep in mind, at the end of the day, if there are any benefits for polyandry or for multiple husbands, it just doesn't work. Let's say that there are some benefits in having multiple husbands, but the overriding harm is huge. It doesn't work. It has not been something that humanity have done throughout the history. I'm not talking about individual cases. I'm talking about a prevalent trend in any society throughout the history of humanity. That they were not doing it. Regardless of the issue of religion, what religion you belong to. So, in summary, the one concept that I wanted to emphasize is that wallahi, it is not in favor of men. It is not for the interest of men, it is for the interest of women, and it is for the interest of the society that, wants to have propriety and chastity and protection of honor and lineage and all of that.
We have a few videos, Jazakallah khairan for that, Sheikh. We have a few videos that we didn't want to show the people, but before that, just to keep my promise that we're not shying away from the tough questions, the penal code, Sheikh. We understand that it is a subset of a subset of a subset in the Sharia. First of all, what percentage would that subset be in terms of rulings, numbers of rulings? Right? It seems like it was center stage in every discussion, especially on certain channels and certain outlets, right? And then the question, isn't it, even if it's a few incidents, rulings, isn't it harsh? Why isn't there a less gruesome form of applying the death penalty? So I guess the percentage first, or the number of rulings first, just to give us a bit of perspective.
Okay, the percentage first. Well, I can't come up with a percentage. I didn't think of a percentage, but if I come up with a percentage now, I'll be making it up on the spot.
But we'll all believe you.
However, I just wanted to tell you that the designated punishments, and hudud in Sharia, designated punishments are 5. They are 5. Some would say 6, but in my book they are 5. And I could tell you why afterwards. But there are 5 punishments that are designated by God, and the rest are discretionary punishments. Ta'zir. The difference between hudud and ta'zir is that hudud are designated by the divine. Ta'zir are discretionary punishments. They're left for the legislatures in Muslim countries to decide. And those five, so how many laws and rules of Sharia do you know in fiqh of worship, in salah, in the last tashahhud, about your finger, how you move your finger? So in terms of the number of laws in Sharia, it certainly is a very small percentage that I would comfortably say less than 5%, but I can't tell you exactly the percentage of.
But we're saying 5 rulings out of perhaps tens of thousands, if not more.
No, but under each one of those 5 rulings, there are sub rulings. So I would say that the entire area of penal laws would certainly be way less than 5%, but I can't really tell you exactly the percentage. Add to that, so you're talking about the severity.
Yeah.
The severity. And
why can't this kind of be modified
okay.
for less gruesome, as they put it?
But before you talk about the penal law with Americans, just comfort them with the following points. Comfort them with the following points. Your fellow Americans are concerned that you are going to force your Sharia laws on them. Tell them Sharia laws are not enforceable on unwilling non-Muslim majority. Or, Sharia laws are not applied outside in terms of hudud. Sharia laws in terms of how I pray, I wash myself should be applicable, any place. But Sharia laws in terms of the penal code are not to be applied outside of the lands of Islam. A Muslim minority in the USA does not seek to impose their laws or their set of values on their fellow citizens. Get this out of the way. The second, the Muslim minority in the USA does comply with the laws of the land, the local laws. Imam Ibn Abd Salam rahimahullah said that even if non-Muslims were to take over a large portion of the Muslim land and they appoint judges, it would be advisable to comply with the judgment of those judges, because otherwise there will be corruption will prevail. So a land without justice, without judiciary, without qada, without judges, would be a land of complete corruption. There will be no judges. Everybody will take whatever he wants, will do whatever he wants at any time. So Ibn Abd Salam said that even if non-Muslims were to take over a portion of the Muslim land and they appoint judges, you listen to those judges. You comply with Allah. When he talked about the Najashi, when he talked about Yusuf, alayhi salam, and talked about Najashi, he said that Najashi was unable to rule by the Sharia because his people would not allow him, even though he was the king. But because the vast majority and all of his aides and so on were not Muslim, Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah said that Najashi was unable to rule by the Sharia. But he did rule with justice as much as he could when Najashi min as-su'ada'i fil akhirah. And despite this, Najashi is one of the prosperous ones in the akhirah, in the hereafter, even though he was unable to rule by Sharia despite being the king. So, yes, the Muslim minority complies and should comply with the local laws.
To avoid a free-for-all.
That's the second thing. Get it out of the way. First, not imposing, get it out of the way. Second, we will also comply, get it out of the way. After this, then he can talk to them about the penal law. And without any hesitation, explain the wisdom of the legislation. Yes, once I believe that this came from God, I'm not going to shy away from saying that I believe it is superior and it is wise, because I believe it came from God. When you basically give me the choice of, or put me in the corner to choose between the divine law and any man-made law, you're asking me to basically choose between my religious affiliation or my religious commitment and my national affiliation. Don't do this. That you're wrong. You would be wrong. No one was agitated when no one from the far right was agitated when Ted Cruz said I'm a Christian first, American second. Why are you being agitated when you hear a Muslim man say that Sharia law, I believe Sharia law is most wise? Well, he will have, by definition, if he believes that it's coming from God, don't expect of him to believe that it is less wise than man-made laws. But the question is, do you want to impose it? No, I do not want to impose it. Are you complying with the local laws or the laws of the land? Yes, I am complying because, naturally speaking, if you live in a diverse society, you're not going to be able to force your values on the rest of the population. Then when you talk about the penal laws, yes, they are severe because they needed to be severe, because there are certain, because Allah wanted to use those laws to deter people from evil and wickedness. Allah did not really intend by those laws mere punishment. Keep this in mind. Do you, sister, do you remember what is the punishment for usury? Riba. What is the designated punishment for riba? I'm sorry for riba, just yeah.
There is none.
There is none. Does anyone remember the punishment for riba? But not only riba, does anyone remember what's the punishment? What is the hadd for eating pork? What's the hadd for eating pork? No hadd for eating pork. So, is riba worse or fornication? Adultery. Riba is worse. By the statement of the Prophet, peace be upon him, he said, one dirham you devour of usury is worse than 36 acts of fornication. So it's worse. So why is there a punishment for fornication and there is not a punishment for riba? Basically, because Allah wanted to protect us from the temptation that will cause our ruin. The temptation is enormous. So since the temptation, that's the pulling force, is enormous, then you have to raise up the fence. Make the fence higher to deter people from falling into this temptation. And whenever there is like a pushing force, such as anger, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that if you get angry and you kill someone, you will be killed. If you get angry and accuse like a woman of impropriety or fornication or adultery or something of that nature, commit the crime of qazf, you will be flogged. You'll be flogged. Because someone would have to, there has to be some form of deterrence here.
More forceful deterrence.
Yeah, more forceful deterrence, because the force of anger is huge, so you have to make the wall higher to stop the person. Or when the pulling force is huge, such as quick acquisition of money, had the sariqa, the punishment for theft. Because theft is about what? Quick acquisition of money. The pulling force is huge. Man's greed for money is known. The same applies to the sexual drive, to the sexual temptation. Pulling force is huge, so you have to higher the fence. So the theory behind the hudud is a theory of deterrence, not a punitive one, not one for the mere punishment or revenge from the crime, the criminal or the wrongdoer.
We have deterrence theories here in the United States. They're doing a good job, no?
No, I don't think so. I don't think that we have enough deterrence against crimes. And the idea of being put in jail for 10 years, I don't think that this is also, that it's extremely problematic. It's extremely problematic because basically you're cutting the person off from the normal society and immersing them in an environment that does not get them any better. I mean, you could imagine, if someone made a mistake once, and then they got put in jail for 5 years, what are the chances that they will actually walk out better than they walked in? If the immersion in the society, I'm not saying that everybody in jail is, particularly evil, but I'm saying that there is a good number of people in jail who are there because they committed crimes.
So we believe that the deterrence theory in Islam is superior and better at doing the objective of stopping the crime.
Also, you're asking me as a Muslim. I can't say no. The question is not applicable to a Muslim. If I know that this is coming from God, I'm not going to second guess God.
There are studies, right? I remember ones you mentioned before, even...
Yeah, about the deterrence theory, about the concept here, and the deterrence theory in America, if you have time, I guess. There are two limbs for the deterrence theory. One limb is the severity of punishment, and the other limb is the chances of being caught. And the emphasis for the past many years or decades, the emphasis was on the chances of being caught. And there was like basically a meta-analysis of 150 studies that indicated that this is all wrong, that this emphasis is wrong. Because sometimes we just even in very developed, very advanced societies, you could be basically deluded away from the truth by some myth that is being propagated and that is being sort of deliberately propagated. So the chances of being caught is one limb, for sure. It is impactful, it is consequential. But the more important limb in the deterrence theory is the severity of punishment.
Which we downplayed.
Which we have downplayed to a great extent. But the sad thing is that we downplayed it, but at the same time we created a monster, which is the sort of department of Department of Korea. I don't know. I'm going to be in trouble. Make it the kind of a department. But the entire jail system is a monster. The number of people that are incarcerated in the United States is enormous. And that system is just creating more and more problems. And I'm not saying that it's about, like a lot of people that we are feeding from our tax money or this or that. No, I'm saying that you're actually causing more harm to those very people that you're trying to fix. The very people that we're trying to fix by getting them through the jail system or correctional facilities are the people that will not be fixed, will be ruined inside.
I actually just read an article, I think it was in the Post or the Times, October 30th through November 2nd of last year. They decided that there were so many younger delinquents that they were overly harsh on in sentences, drug offenses and the likes, and so they released within 3 days. The Federal Department of Corrections released 6,000 inmates within 3 days. They recanted on those verdicts, and they said within the next calendar year they're going to release another 8,000, just like that. So they're beginning to acknowledge some of the flaws of the monster. We do have to close, right? We don't have too much time because Maghrib is coming in. We'll just take a few minutes after Maghrib, our brother playing the video. We have 6 quick 1 minute, 2 minute clips. We would love to share the insight if we haven't touched on these matters already. We can take it. Can we get the first clip out?
If you are in this religion, you probably do have values that are at odds. This is what liberals don't want to recognize. You may be from a country, as there are many, many Muslim countries that either have Sharia law or want Sharia law. Those values are not our values. Can I read what David Cameron said? He's the Prime Minister of Britain, as we know. He said, the root cause of the threat we face is the extremist ideology itself. Let's not forget our strongest weapon, our own liberal values. We believe in respecting different faiths, but also expecting these faiths to support the British way of life. Too often we have lacked the confidence to enforce our values for fear of causing offense. And then he talks about the horrors of forced marriage. He talks about how the utter brutality of female genital mutilation is too common in his country, nearly 4,000 cases, and that's just the reported cases, 11,000 cases of honor-based violence. I'm not saying this is going to happen in America, but this idea that somehow we do share values, that all religions are alike, is bullshit. And we need to call it bullshit.
But the issue that coexistence is a facade, right? We cannot coexist. So long as you have that value system, I cannot coexist with you because you cannot coexist with me when you believe in that. The Sheikh want to mention just like 60 seconds on this, or you can skip it.
60 seconds is not enough, but
75.
First of all, but I agree. I don't agree with his style of expression, but I agree that religions are not alike. Some theosophists may think that religions are all alike, but the religions are not alike. However, what we are saying is that people of different religious background should be able to coexist and also recognize the commonalities between the religious doctrines and work to cooperate in goodness and piety and compete for goodness and piety. Allah said, لِكُلٍّ جَعَلْنَا مِنكُمْ شَرْعَةً وَمِنْهَاجًا. For each of you, we made a law and a method. وَلَوْ شَاءَ اللَّهُ لَجَعَلَكُمْ أُمَّةً وَاحِدَةً. And had Allah willed, He would have made you one nation. وَلَكِنْ لِيَبْلُوَكُمْ فِيمَا آتَاكُمْ. But He made you into different nations to test you concerning that which He had given you. فَاسْتَبِقُوا الْخَيْرَاتِ. Then compete for goodness. Then compete for goodness. إِلَى اللَّهِ مَرْجِعُكُمْ جَمِيعًا. To Allah is your return, all of you. فَيُنَبِّئُكُمْ بِمَا كُنْتُمْ فِيهِ تَخْتَلِفُونَ. And then He will tell you concerning that which you disagreed over. So Islam does recognize that religions are not all alike. There are differences. There are fundamental differences between the religions. There are commonalities where we could cooperate. But I think most of the people would agree on a lot of commonalities between the different religions. But certainly in matters of belief and in matters of practice, there are peculiarities in all religions, and there are fundamental differences. But the Islamic prescription basically to deal with those fundamental differences is there. For every nation there is a law and there is a method. فَاسْتَبِقُوا الْخَيْرَاتِ. Compete for goodness. Compete for goodness, which means that we could coexist. وثيقة المدينة, or basically the Constitution of Medina, the treaties of Medina, the Treaty of Medina, the Prophet ﷺ signed with the Jews. Although from a hadith perspective, the narration may have some weakness, but from a historical perspective, and even from a hadith perspective, according to some of the scholars, it is valid. But from a historical perspective, it is confirmed. Is an example of basically the equality in civil rights and obligations between the residents of the one city of Medina, despite of their religious differences. Despite of their religious differences. So yes, I agree that not all religions are alike. Certainly I disagree with the expression, and I disagree with the intent. But I agree with that statement that religions are not alike. The commonalities, we can invest in them, and we can cooperate in goodness and piety, and then we can compete for goodness using our own laws and sets of values. Yeah.
Welcome back to Hannity. A shocking new video from documentary filmmaker Ami Horowitz reveals that some American Muslims living in Minneapolis would prefer Sharia law right here in the U.S. Watch this.
Do you feel more comfortable living under American law, or do you feel more comfortable living under Sharia law?
Sharia law. I'm a Muslim. I prefer Sharia law. Sharia law, yes.
You prefer Sharia law over American law?
Of course, yeah. Of course, yeah.
And do you find most of your friends feel the same way?
Yeah, of course. If you're Muslim, yeah.
Joining me now, Fox News contributor Ami Horowitz is with us. Okay, tell us the circumstances under which you got this video.
Well, and the sort of the genesis of it was I spent a lot of time doing these videos all across the world, and whenever I'm in Europe, I marvel at the fact that there's such a lack of integration between in the Muslim community all across Europe, in France and London, and we have so many terrorist attacks going on. Over the past 12 months, we've had over a dozen terrorist attacks here in the United States. And in Minnesota in particular, there have been maybe 20 to 40 Minneapolis-based Muslims who have gone to fight for ISIS and Al-Shabaab. And it blew me away. I couldn't believe it. So I said, I got to go find out what's going on. So I decided to go.
Are these natural-born American citizens, or are they immigrants?
The vast majority of the people I spoke to were either born here or they immigrated here legally and grew up in the United States.
I guess, considering that this is the antithesis of American values, the treatment of women and freedom of speech. For example, let me run this next tape that these people that Ami interviewed actually said it should be illegal to make fun of the Prophet Muhammad. Watch this.
Would it be better if we made it illegal in America to make fun of the Prophet Muhammad?
Definitely, yeah.
Do you think we should make a law that makes it illegal to
That would be better, yeah. That would be better.
Yeah.
To stop, aggression.
I was so upset and I was so mad. They insulted our religion, they insulted our prophet, and we couldn't take it.
And they shouldn't be allowed to do that.
Oh my God, big time, yes.
Big time, yes. So they don't believe in freedom of speech. They don't believe in American values.
Against freedom of speech. Interestingly, just last week I read an article, but it's an ongoing case for the past 2 years. There are these parents fighting for their children back because it all started with a birthday cake that the supermarket baker refused to make for the child. One man, he named his first child Adolf Hitler, and the other child was named Aryan Nation. Those are their first names. They have a dual first name. And social services was contacted eventually, and their children were taken away from them, right? And now they're filing, trying to get their kids back through, freedom of expression and the likes. But again, if the Muslims believe that certain things are sacred, they're against American values and freedom of expression. Would you like to add anything here?
I just wanted to point out that man does not come in 3 dimensions, and honor should be respected. People's honor should be respected. Additionally, incitement of hatred should not be accepted even in a secular society because it could be consequential.
Like getting beat up at a Trump rally?
If you ask any devout Christian, should it be illegal to curse Jesus? Why are you fighting for your freedom to insult others? What kind of freedom is this? Like, why is it? Why can't we say that freedom of expression means freedom of criticism? And as Muslims, we do understand that as a non-Muslim, you may criticize my religion, you may criticize my prophet. But what is sort of itching you to insult me, insult my religious icons, insult my symbols, my prophet? What is good about this? What is good about insulting people? Why can't it be freedom of criticism? And then you will not find people arguing with you because the people within any discourse between the followers of 2 religions, there will be criticism involved. But why is it freedom to insult me or to insult my iconic figures? That's extremely important because it results in hatred and resentment between the people, and that should not even be good or allowable from the social well-being perspective.
I guess maybe all that feeds back to get the next video off the issue of morality evaporating when our purpose is not present.
Mr. Safari, while you are a minority in the Muslim community in many ways, and more liberal-minded in your views, generally speaking, we know the application of Sharia renders or relegates women and minorities and other religious faiths to second-class citizens. So that's just a fact when you look at the application of Sharia in Muslim countries. So if you have more than half of Muslims in America that want Sharia, they are basically saying they don't support the U.S. Constitution, where you have freedom of religion and freedom of expression.
Yeah, it's what surprises me. The reason this surprises me because the most fundamental principle in Islam on this subject is that the law of the land supersedes all other laws. So in the verses in the Quran that talk about government do not specify any religious involvement. They say put your trust in those that are in authority in your country, and it tells those people in authority to be just, not religious.
So the law of the land supersedes all other laws. I think the Shaykh, Hafidahullah, if you would permit me, would you like to say anything on this?
Yeah, from a theological perspective, you believe that God's laws are superior, but from a legalistic perspective, from a compliance perspective, you're complying with the laws of the land. You're not imposing the laws of your religion on anyone. Additionally, you, as an individual, as a community, you're complying with the local laws.
So you believe the divine laws are superior?
You keep that to yourself. Yes, absolutely. Well, if the Supreme Court rules that abortion is permissible and a devout Christian believes that God does not believe so, then that devout Christian is entitled to keeping his belief to himself. Otherwise, if you tell him choose between being a devout Christian or being American, that is unfair. That's just unfair.
And women are not seen equally as their male counterparts under Sharia law. And you see this in Iran, you see this in Afghanistan, and you also now see it coming back on the table in Iraq with the Joffrey personal status law. And what this is it's a 1,000-plus-year-old tradition of Sharia law where it permissibly allows a 9-year-old girl to be married. And it gives male father and grandfather guardianship over females. Now, Iraq had a legal
and 9-year-old girls are sent off to be married. Little children are.
Yes, child marriage is a huge problem.
Mm-hmm. And what is the issue with the Prophet Muhammad on this?
There's debate, and there's and I'm sure there's debate and there's different interpretations. But bottom line is that it should never be allowed.
Against their will, you want to.
Well,
we addressed lots of this, right?
60 seconds again, or what?
You guys can tell I don't know how to answer me my shit, right?
If I want to give a reply to this, it really takes a lot more than 60 seconds. But basically, the age of marriage is a huge issue. One of the first thing that I want you to say. Keep in mind that there are different layers of Sharia interpretation of Sharia law. There is the layer of the public interpretation of Sharia law, mixed with culture. And in order for you to defend the Sharia law, you don't really need to defend each and every practice by every Muslim community or every nation that subscribes to Islam and throughout the ages. No, because culture is not always, unless it is pan-Islamic culture, then it will likely have roots in Islam. But individual national cultures of Muslims do not necessarily need to reflect the correct Islamic teachings. So you have to figure this out first. Is this culture or not? Then there is a second layer, which is what? Which is the interpretation of the scholars. The interpretation of the scholars does not always have to be Sharia, like we said before, because the scholars are not infallible. So you have to figure what is this? They tell you that this is the Islamic ruling. Is this the ruling? Is this like a minority ruling, esoteric ruling, a majority ruling, or a ruling by consensus? 4 different levels. Esoteric is eccentric ruling, eccentric, far away. Minority, majority, minority and majority are respectable rulings, respectable ijtihads, but then they're not certain. When the implication is certain and there is a consensus, then there you should be very forceful in your defense. Very assertive. I'm not saying forceful, you should be aggressive, but you should be very assertive.
Matters of unanimous agreement.
Yes, matters of unanimous agreement between the scholars. Those are the ones that you should be very assertive in defending them. If it is the majority position and it is your own position, you should not be extremely assertive because you don't have certainty it is the Sharia. If it is a minority position and it is whether or not it is your own position, it is clearly something that you should not be too assertive about, because the majority of Muslim scholars are saying the opposite of what you're saying. If it is an esoteric, eccentric position, if that esoteric, eccentric position, you pointed out that this is an esoteric, eccentric position, but even if the esoteric, eccentric position is the basically more culturally favorable position, you still mention it, that there is a position, as long as it's not a matter of unanimous agreement. You still throw it out there, because you should not be the ultimate judge. You're not representing yourself, keep in mind. You're representing Islam. And if there is an esoteric position, the esoteric position does not mean the position of my aunt. It means the position of a major mujtahid, but it's still esoteric because the rest of the mujtahideen did not agree with her. You should still bring it up in the discussion. So even in the issue, in any issue, like eternity of the hellfire, there is an esoteric position that the hellfire is not eternal. So if there is an atheist that just can't wrap his head around the eternity of hellfire, or an agnostic that can't wrap his head around the eternity of the hellfire, you just tell them there is a position. Keep in mind, this is not the position of one or two scholars, several scholars. And they are not tier 2 scholars, they are tier 1 scholars that said that the hellfire. So even though we deem it esoteric, don't close the door. Keep crack open the door. Let him come in. If he can't wrap his head around the concept of the eternity of hellfire. So issues where there is unanimity, be assertive in defending them. Now, the age of marriage for women. The first thing that you want to mention is that many Muslim scholars, many contemporary Muslim scholars would say that we should set a minimum age for marriage. Do you agree with their position? Yes? No? It doesn't matter. But many contemporary Muslim scholars say that we should set a limit for, like a lower limit for the age of marriage, a requirement, an age requirement for marriage. You have to mention this first, because basically they're fuming, and their intellect is obstructed by the biases, cultural biases. If you take time to analyze the cultural biases and tell them that until 1889 in California, the age of marriage was 10 years, and the age of marriage in New Mexico and Mississippi is 13 and 14 years, even though it is 18 in other states, so across the border it would be, child abuse, and you cross, and it would be completely valid. Arbitrary, numbers are given. So in Islam, although, like, the biblical tradition, like the biblical tradition, there was no lower requirement, like the sort of minimum age for marriage. Although there was no minimum age for marriage, yet the scholars did clearly say that this applies to the marriage contract. Consummation of marriage, he should not be allowed, the husband should not be allowed, the father should not be allowed to give his wife in marriage for his daughter in marriage for consummation until she is capable of all the requirements of marriage, physical and emotional and mental requirements to become married.
Can we, if there's a need, we'll extend it after. Can you just play the last two clips back to back? Because I have to stop for Salah now, inshallah. Then we'll open the floor to questions and answers, and we'll ask you guys questions.
Frank, and if I can add one thing, if I can add one thing, Judge, the Assembly of Muslim American Jurists, AMJA, also, which is a very respectable organization in the United States, very respected. They are very influential. They sit on university boards, Islamic mosques, imams, etc. They sanction the killing of any infidel who commits blasphemy against Islam. And these are the Assembly of American Muslim Jurists. I mean, this is how mainstream it is here in America.
Well, you know, when you talk about this thinking, I mean, you know, you've got these blasphemy laws and the Sharia, and now we're hearing about these no-go zones in Europe and Sharia courts in Europe. Is that a reality? I mean, are there as many as 700 of them? Frank, are you familiar with this?
Yeah, there are 751, I think, is the latest count in France alone. These are areas in which the authorities dare not go because basically it's too dangerous for them. These are areas that are ruled effectively by Sharia. And the question is, are we on a different trajectory as far as these folks? The Muslim Brotherhood is the prime mover behind it. I would suggest to you that it's not the case. We've done a booklet just recently on Sharia being introduced into our courts. It's available for free at securefreedom.org. I encourage people to look at it because, just as Brigitte says, it talks about this AMJA organization as a prime mover behind trying to get Sharia inculcated into our court systems, as the Brotherhood is trying to do really all of our civil society institutions for the express purpose of destroying Western civilization from within. That's a quote from them.
Okay.
So, do you feel that you are British?
I identify myself as Muslim. If I was born in a stable, you know, I'm not going to be a horse. If I was born in Nazi Germany, I'm not going to be a Nazi. I mean, this is just an island I was born in.
Rumeysa and Chowdhury both live in East London, which is home to one of the largest Muslim populations in the UK. In one part of town, Rumeysa and his associates have set up so-called Sharia patrols to go out and discourage behavior that they deem un-Islamic. On this night, they stopped to talk to a couple of non-Muslim men who were in a park drinking beer, which is forbidden under Islam.
So we're just reminding the community about staying safe. And in this area, there's a lot of gambling that goes on, a lot of alcohol drinking, and it leads to a lot of problems. So we advise you, and we advise anyone you see, to stay away from these things.
Get the prostitutes off my street!
But the patrols are not always so friendly. Online clips give a very different picture. A woman in a short skirt is abused.
Vigilante! They're not dressed like that in Muslim area. I'm super.
We don't care if you're appalled at all.
Miss Mary, it's Great Britain.
This we don't care. It's not so Great Britain.
A man the patrol thinks is gay is insulted.
Get out of here quicker then. You're dirty, mate. You're a gay, mate. Get out of here, mate.
The night time it turns into a very ugly place like many of the...
Walking through London with Rumeysa, you experience an alternate reality where there is no compromise and all conversations are one-sided.
Ultimately, I want to see every single woman in this country covered from head to toe. I want to see the hand of the thief cut. I want to see adulterers stoned to death. I want to see Sharia law in Europe, and I want to see it in America as well. I believe our patrols are a means to an end.
The only thing I would say is that in America and in the United Kingdom, we have a system, democracy,
backwards one,
but it's a system that allows the people to choose what they want and allows people freedom.
So why can't I choose Sharia? When in Rome, overthrow Caesar, implement the Sharia.
In your home, you can do whatever you want.
But what about in the public? Why can't I tell you to cover up? Am I free to say that?
Because it would be outrageous.
So where's my freedom? Where's my freedom?
You can say it to me, but
okay, so cover up. Wear the hijab.
That's absurd.
طيب بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Welcome back everybody. Before we jump into the questions from the audience, we just wish to address a bit on those last two videos. The first of them about the mainstream Islamic organizations being the driving force behind Muslims trying to undermine American civilization and causing a collapse from within, and they've infiltrated our system and are trying to take over the judicial system and have their laws applied in our courts. The end of it, I guess we'll start there, inshallah.
Okay. Well, in all honesty, if you just, it would take the 38 minutes to answer this because there's just a lot of fallacies. And it is so sad that the gentleman that was speaking was a judge. She said judge there, right? And when a judge completely loses his sense of justice, he's saying that he's quoting us. You know, I'm a member of the Federal Committee of Amjad,
Surprise.
So, like when he says that, he's quoting us saying that we want to basically sort of implode it from within or destroy it from within and stuff like that. I don't know, you know, whom is he quoting and what kind of statement is this? And it would be just irrational. I don't know like what level of intelligence the audience is. Because, you know, like if you have any little intelligence, you would figure out that they probably are not saying this. You know, they're probably, even if they are saying it in closed rooms, they would not be saying it in public. They would not be publishing it. You would not have access to it. So quoting us saying this, I mean, we're not even saying it in closed rooms. Where the bottom line here is, as Muslims, we do believe in the Prophet's statement, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, لا يبلغ عبد حقيقة الإيمان حتى يحب للناس ما يحب لنفسه. A man will not have true faith until he loves, حتى يحب للناس ما يحب لنفسه. A man will not have true faith until he loves for the people what he loves for himself. So if we go out and give da'wah to the people, that is not because we want to infiltrate and we want to blow it up from within and implode it and all of that stuff. It is because basically, if we value what we have, we want to share it. That's just simply what it is. If you like buy a cake and you like it so much, and you like your like, you know, like, and you have like some, one of your kids is out of state, out of the country. You may want to preserve a piece of this cake for your kid to come back so that you share it with your child because you find it so tasty. You value it. So you want to share it with the people that you love the most. We do this. We value our deen. We want to share it with the rest of humanity because we care for humanity. So that is basically the driving force behind our da'wah effort. At the same time, we reiterate and emphasize that we do not want to impose the teachings of our religion on the unwilling majority or on the non-Muslim majority, and that we are complying with the laws. However, the laws, when they give you room, let's give you an example. I'll give you a scenario. Because the reason why some people are concerned, for like Amja, for instance, what is our business? What do? We do research in Sharia matters. And why is this relevant? Why do we do this in America? Why do we do this in the West unless we really have an agenda to force Sharia on the West? No, it's not true. You know, sometimes the antecedent is not sufficient for the consequent to be true. Like you make your conditional statement, you make your assumptions, you know, they don't always have to be true. They may be true to you, but they're not true to the rest of the people. So why are we doing this? We're doing this because if you're married, if this fellow is married, and then he says to his wife, you know, I want you to basically spend on the family. I just want to take some time off from work, and I want you to spend on the family. And then, you know, she tells him, but wait a second, we're Muslim. You are the husband. Your role here is to spend on the family. And then they will find some sort of source of information, authentic source of information that is aware of their culture, aware of their circumstances, aware of their, you know, basically time and place variables to provide them information. Does Islam really require husbands to spend on their households? And then if they get this piece of information from the Sharia, from, you know, from Amja, if they reach out to Amja or they log into the website or they visit the website of Amja and they find this piece of information, they mutually agree that we will accept this because it is, you know, what Islam teaches us. So why would this aggravate anyone? Why would this agitate anyone? If you and your business partner are involved in some transaction and you want to resolve it, and you go to the imam, which people go to the rabbis, they go to the priests, they go to their religious counselors all the time. You seek counsel from the imam to resolve this issue. And the imam who knows about the Sharia tells you, so what's the problem? You know, he's charging me interest. And the imam tells you, but the interest is haram, brother. You can't charge your brother interest. And then they agree on dropping it. They agree, mutually agree. Keep in mind, no matter how much the imam tells them, the imam cannot prevent them. The imam has spiritual power, has moral authority. More, spiritual power, not in the but no, has like spiritual authority and moral authority. He does not have any jurisdiction to enforce any of his edicts on anyone. They can walk away and go to the court after they listen to the imam. If they did not want to listen to the imam will not be able to prevent them. So the Sharia law here is not replacing the court system. It is not replacing the local laws. But if they mutually agreed between themselves, okay, I'll drop the interest, and everybody's happy and they walked away, why should this agitate anyone? Why should this be a problem? Why should this be like a usurpation or a violation of the local laws? It should not. It should not. And it actually should relieve the court system from the extra burden of having to resolve family disputes between people, having to listen to like a long-winded, argument between two, like a wife and a husband. So you free up the time of the judge for other matters, criminal issues, like other matters that may be of more pressing importance or greater urgency. So that is the work of AMJA. AMJA provides information so that when the local laws permit for people upon mutual agreement to seek, arbitration from their counselors, religious counselors, those religious counselors will be empowered by fatwa that are not only authentic. Keep in mind that this is a major part of what AMJA does, but by fatwa that are not only authentic and based in the revelation and in the tradition, but also cognizant of the variables of the time and place and the circumstances. So I think that they're just completely wrong about everything here. And no one is trying to basically destroy anything from within. We intend good for all of humanity, and we just want to live by whenever it is permitted, whenever there is room, we want to live by our convictions.
And the second video regarding the Sharia patrols, and obviously this is a reactionary practice, the provocative speech, the
Okay, here's another issue with the media. I mean, so this particular brother, who is he? Like, first of all, certainly he's Muslim, But I'm saying, okay, so can I bring like basically the media in the Middle East or in Pakistan or wherever, can they bring any Christian to represent Christianity? Like they bring just any Christian to represent Christianity? Does he belong to it? Is he represented? Are those views the views of any mainstream Muslim organization in the UK? I don't know of any mainstream Muslim organization in the UK that has those views. So it is basically selective. The choice itself is selective. But would it, let's be fair, would it warrant concern, from the public? It is concerning. I mean, whatever he's saying is concerning, for sure. Keep in mind, this is not what Islam teaches us. I mean, you are musta'man. Basically, you abide by the governing treaty here, the governing contract is the contract of citizenship or the contract of your visa if you're not a citizen. That is the governing contract between you and the society, right? You're a citizen or you're a visitor here. if you're a citizen, the governing contract between you and the society is citizenship. That is a covenant. That is a contract. And if you're a visitor, the governing contract is the visa by which you came into the country. So, based on the governing contract or covenant that we as Muslims, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu awfu bil uqud, or you believe to fulfill your covenants, based on the governing contract, you're not allowed to do this. You're not allowed to usurp the jurisdiction of the local courts or the local police law enforcement agencies. So that is where Muslims, are wrong, and we just have to say, here there is no validation for this from any from Islamically. There is no validation for this Islamically. You cannot enforce your own rules on the rest of the people, the rest of the population. Even in a Muslim country, to be honest with you, you could only advise people, you could only talk to the people, gently advise people, and there has to be also the proper context. Walking, to just walk in the street and advise like perfect strangers in Cairo about anything, where I come from, you would get in trouble. Honestly speaking, you would be punched in the face. You would just get in trouble. But there has to be the context, the circumstances have to be appropriate for the exchange of advice. But it's also advice. But even in a Muslim country, you do not enforce the laws. That is usurping افتئات على السلطة. افتئات على افتئات على القضاء. افتئات على القاضي. افتئات على المحتسبين. افتئات على السلطات. So that is usurping the jurisdiction of the qada, or the rights of the people in charge, or the authorities, and that is not allowed. So it is basically something that is concerning for the public, particularly in the UK, and I'm quite sure that they would have not been able to produce a similar video here, or a similar program here in the US, because I don't think that in the US the stuff happens anywhere in the US. But I would assume that this would be concerning for the British people, and they would be rightfully concerned. This is wrong. This is not Islamic.
I'm going to jump to the questions sent by the audience, and first and foremost, forgive me, I'm going to have to skip over the fiqh questions. Just try to stay as much on topic as possible. We're on the clock. We only have 23 minutes left. Sheikh, you mentioned that if you look at a place like Germany, for example, there are more women than men, and there's.
No, this was just. By the way, I also mentioned something that because I'm being, I don't do pressure talking. I'm under pressure because of the lack of time, and these are huge concepts that I will just want to basically bring out as much information as I can within a limited time, because these are huge issues. Each one of them could have taken 2 hours by itself, and I'm afraid that I'm doing injustice to Islam, because the argument sometimes, like an insufficient or incomplete argument, could be worse than not presenting an argument on behalf of the deen. So it's pressure talking. So I want to say that I mentioned in Germany, by the way, I don't know. Last time I heard of a surplus was like several years ago. I don't know if there is a surplus or not. I just was mentioning any country, but go check the census of different countries. You will find a lot of surplus of women in all countries, particularly in Western countries.
Because the quote here, the question that was presented, that there's a link here saying we looked it up, and there are more males in the world than females, and there's a geohive link.
Is that by country?
No, by country.
Not by country.
Because China,
by country.
because of China's one child only policy, they have a huge surplus of men, but that's only from China. In the rest of the world, there's a female predominance because women usually outlive men, amongst other reasons.
Yeah, and keep in mind that this is not, keep in mind that throughout the history, men died in wars. Women didn't die, not that many women died in wars. But men died more in wars. Up until World War II, the extreme imbalance between the ratio of men and women in Europe created so many problems that everybody is aware of. You know, after World War I, and the imbalance between in the male to female ratio in Europe created a lot of problems. It started to undermine the institution of marriage to a great extent. You know, higher rates of infidelity were seen because of this. It created a lot of problems. But like I said, I just mentioned Germany, and the other issue that I wanted to correct also is that I said that in California, the 10 years was the lowest age of marriage in 1889. That was the lowest age for consensual sex, but not necessarily marriage, but for consensual sex. Like a 10-year-old may consent to sex at that age. And you know, I not mentioned that during the time of Shakespeare, this is not during the time of the Prophets, but during the time of Shakespeare, 13 and 14 was late for marriage. If you read Romeo and Juliet and the various novels by Shakespeare, 13 and 14 years of age was considered too late for marriage. So I was just mentioning this to say that that people of a particular era should not use their culture of norms as a measuring stick by which they judge people of other eras and other places. Your culture of norms are not the measuring stick. Yes, sir.
I am a therapist and have seen the outcome of broken families and missing fathers in my patients. I sometimes find myself encouraging them to have a man in their children's lives, but I realize in their case it would be fornication with that man. What should I do? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm a therapist. I've seen the outcome of broken families and missing fathers in my patients. I sometimes find myself encouraging them to have a man in their children's lives, but I realize in their case it would be fornication with that man. What should I do?
You advise them to have a man, to have a husband, to have a man, you know, and then you do not need to be sort of questioning them about the nature of the relationship, whether it is, you know, marriage or otherwise. Just advise them to have a male figure. If that's advisable. I'm not a therapist. I mean, it is advisable. Like, kids do need a male figure. But certainly, like, what you're advising them to do is to have a male figure in a legitimate way. That is your intent, that is your advice. You're not responsible for what happens afterwards. A legitimate male figure will be helpful or may be helpful, but an illegitimate male figure, we believe, may not be particularly helpful.
With regards to the story mentioned about the woman who was diagnosed with cancer and would die in 15 years, what if it was the other way around? What if the guy was the one sick? How should the man act? I mean, why should she be stuck?
No, she will not be stuck. If she demands to separate from the man, she will separate from the man. It is just that this is a good example on what I said, that even though they may be benefit for polyandry, the overriding harm and impossibility of this being the normative of the society, or the norm of the society, or the normative practice of the society, it is just impossible. It did not happen historically. You know, so large nations, this was never a prevalent trend in any nation for any significant period of time. This may be a variant, sort of practiced by small groups here or there, individuals here or there, possible. But do you recall a nation that has an established institution of polyandry, historically? No, you don't. Do you recall a civilization that had this? No, you don't. Whereas you're on the other side, in the biblical tradition, Quranic tradition, and away from religions, polygyny has been widely practiced. So here, the woman may have the right to separate from the man if he is not fulfilling her needs. The woman has the right to separate from the man because he's not fulfilling his needs. Why are we not advising her to keep him and have a second husband? Because as we said, it doesn't work this way. For various reasons. Not only for the confusion of lineage, because now we have DNA, and you could say you could do paternity testing and so on. We did not have DNA like 200 years ago to figure out who's the father, which caused like a biological dilemma, or because you have a child now, she's married to two husbands, she has a child, and who's the father? It will be difficult. You bring a physiognomist to try to figure out the side, but it is difficult. Now we do have DNA, but that is not the only reason why a woman should not keep two husbands. Women themselves would not agree to this. It is not part of their natural human indisposition, not part of their fitrah. It's not built in like this. Dr. Hassan was just telling me that the Ashley Madison website, they found like tens of thousands of male subscribers, but
out of all the members, 3 per 10,000 were presumed that they could possibly be women. There was millions of users exposed, but only 3 per 10,000 were suspected to be
3 per 10,000
were possibly women.
3 per 10,000 of the subscribers to the website were possibly women. It just shows you that it is not part of, and I always say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed our sisters with this, virtue, with this quality of having greater restraint in this regard to protect the societies, to protect the, humanity.
No system is perfect and there's always a scope for improvement. Is there anything that Sharia can learn from the current legal systems? What is wrong with a hybrid system?
No system is perfect, and is there anything that the Sharia could learn from the current systems? What about what's wrong with the hybrid system? Okay. If you mean the Sharia, the Fiqh, our understanding of the divine prescriptions, I agree with you 100%. If you mean the Sharia, the divinely prescribed laws, you're saying that God could learn from you. Isn't that crazy? So it depends on what you're meaning. It depends on what you're saying. If you're saying that the divinely prescribed laws, or divine laws, are imperfect, and that there is room for God to learn from man, and that's just like,
Those are ancient.
That's completely insane. But if you're saying that our understanding of the Sharia, the body of Fiqh, which is the scholarly understanding of the Sharia, could learn from the positive or the secular laws, particularly the judicial system, particularly incorporating forensic medicine, expert opinion within the judicial system, and things of that nature, yes. If it is not in conflict with certain divine prescriptions, then yes, there is room for the jurists to learn. In fact, no one is saying that. The mainstream jurists are not saying no to this. Now in Egypt, for instance, even Al-Azhar, Sheikh Salah al-Sawi, the college that he graduated from is called today Sharia Qanun. It's the College of Sharia and Qanun, laws. And they study, and this Azhar, that is like the college, the law school of Al-Azhar. They study both Sharia and Qanun. Because yes, there is room for the fuqaha to learn from the current laws or the judicial systems in different parts of the world. But that is not saying that the Sharia needs to be patched up. That is saying that the laws, which is the final product, after the human factor, the human element is factored in. After the human element is factored in, those laws, yeah, there is room for the jurists to benefit from the current judicial systems.
How to address the issue of the had, the prescribed punishment for a female saying she was raped, being punished for her zina.
Okay, so the had for a female say, keep in mind, because sometimes when they talk about this in the media, they say how unfair, how misogynist is it to require a woman that was raped to produce 4 witnesses against her rapist. Yeah, that sounds like, bad, right? You have to produce very stringent. You're making it difficult for the woman. Well, this was not made for the woman to begin with. This was actually made in favor of the woman that is accused of fornication or adultery. The scenario where the Hadd al-Qasf was legislated, what is the scenario for the legislation of Hadd al-Qasf? A man accused a woman of adultery or fornication, and then the man would need to or accused like a man and a woman because it's tough. So it was the Hadd al-Qasf was to be implemented first against a man, not a woman. The accuser was a man, not a woman. So Hadd al-Qasf, which is the punishment for accusing a woman of impropriety or fornication or adultery, or a man, a couple of improprieties, fornication or adultery, was made so stringent. The establishment of the crime of fornication or adultery was made so difficult so that people do not accuse others of this crime that will basically tear apart families, that will destroy families and so on. So produce 4 witnesses to say that, yes, I saw them doing this. Extremely difficult unless you're doing it in the street. Unless they're doing it in the street, it's extremely difficult. That is why in the time of the Prophet and the Sahaba, there was not a single case of the punishment of fornication being established on the basis of testimony of 4 witnesses. How did they establish it? Only on the basis of confession. Because really, it has to be you coming and confessing to be purified from your sin. Otherwise, requiring 4 witnesses shows you that it is not a punitive measure. It is a deterrent measure. It is just to say to people, at least do not do it in public. Do not have those parties that people have nowadays. Yeah. So the stringent criteria were not to deter the raped woman from taking her rapist to court. They were meant to deter people from accusing others of fornication or adultery. Now, if a woman comes and says, this fellow raped me, the Cosby story, if you believe Bill Cosby, then I don't know you'll believe who you're going to believe in this one. But I don't know the details of anything, guys. I'm just saying that, this story, so either they are fabricating lies against them or they are saying the truth. But is it possible that they are fabricating lies against them? is it possible that someone who has a position like a status in the society, that someone will pay someone to fabricate a lie against them and get them in trouble, ruin their reputation, let alone, the punishment and so on, but just ruin their reputation in a Muslim society? Could this happen? Yes. So how do you prove it? For the last 1400 years, how would you be able to prove it? She came and she claimed that. So it will be said to her like it will be said to anyone else. Do you have evidence? Because it's your word against his word. He's denying. What if he admitted it's not, right? But if he's denying, it's your word against his word. Produce your evidence. So that's what used to happen. Nowadays, with a progress in forensic medicine, an advancement in DNA technology, and things of that nature, then we do have room not to establish the crime, because there is still a shubha. Because even if you find like some remains of semen or hair or cells on her body, that does not really establish the crime of actual sexual intercourse, forcible sexual intercourse. Could it have been consensual? Yes. Could it have been nothing? No contact whatsoever. But that sample was brought and placed somewhere. Yes. So you can't really, but at least you will know that there was something fishy here about, that this man did something like fishy. His cells or his semen or his hair is, how did you get it? Then that will lead you to investigate the matter further, drop the charges against her, the counter charges of qadh or accusation against her, and although you may eventually not be able to establish the punishment against the man, at least you will drop the charges against her. But through further investigation and confronting the man with the evidence, you may be able to get him to confess, and then you establish the had. And if he did not confess, and you reached a certain level of, propensity or close to certainty that this man was involved in something improper, you will apply discretionary punishment. But the had itself, you cannot apply it as long as you have any little shubha or any little doubt in the admissibility of proofs or the establishment of the crime. Both ways.
We only have 3 minutes left. Being worse than zina, usury being worse than fornication. More than once it has come up now, then how do we deal with having to take student loans? So I'll make a small fiqh exception. This is the first, and I'll ask you the second in a few seconds.
In AMJA and also in the European Council of Fatwa and Research, the ECFR, we said that student loans are accepted from the general prohibition of riba, not because they are not riba, because they are riba. However, riba is riba. To loan with riba is different from borrowing with riba. To lend is different from borrowing. Lending with riba is never halal in any circumstance. Borrowing, with riba is halal in cases of necessity or public needs. And sometimes the question of private need or the individual need is another question. But in our estimation, there is a public need for student loans, because the Muslim minorities in the West, we may be condemning them to, failing to, in education or being behind or losing out on education compared to their peers, particularly in graduate education, where it gets to be extremely tough, but also in undergraduate education. If we tell them that you cannot take student loans. And for this public need, we said that it would be permitted. Is it clear? For this public need. Now, if you are wealthy enough to pay for your kids, don't get loans and say I'm giving them because the interest rates are lower and I could invest my money in my 401k or something because I get like a higher interest rate, because this is riba. This is a problem. This is a musibah still. We're allowing it for this pressing need. But if you're wealthy enough to pay for your kids, you should pay for your kids. You should not basically use the system to put your money in a higher interest yielding investment and take student loan and all those tricks. Pay for your kids, because you should, spare yourself and your kids of the problem and the musibah of riba. But we're saying for those who are incapable, that is what has been decided by AMJA and the ECFR, European Council for Qadar Research.
The last question is, what is the consequence punishment of abortion, and what can you do to be forgiven? Forgiveness for abortion.
The punishment for abortion, basically in this case, she will have to pay the diya of the abortee to the father, unless they agreed on it. Then she's not going to pay the diya because he's accomplice to the issue. But that is talking about abortion that is unwarranted. Criminal abortion is different from just abortion, generic abortion. Because in Islam, the rules of abortion are a little bit different. You have different phases. First 40 days, 40 to 120, and after 120. In the first 40 days, actually the majority would allow abortion in the first 40 days upon mutual agreement between the two parents. So is that called Plan B? Yeah. Right? Plan B.
Plan B, I think, is if you have unprotected intercourse and you just want to make sure that there's no...
Yeah, so Plan B is still well within this 40 days. Well within, because it's right after. So this would include Plan B. That is according to the majority, unless you're a Maliki, then from the point of conception it is haram. And unless you're also Ghazali, from the point of conception it's haram. Whoever followed the Ghazali within the Shafi'i school, from the point of conception it will be haram. But the majority of scholars, Hanafis, Hanbalis, majority of Shafi'is, and so on, would consider this permissible upon mutual agreement in the first 40 days. 40 days to 120 days is a little bit different. Here it would be only permissible if there is an indication, whether it is an indication on the part of the fetus or the mother. Fetal indication or maternal indication. Maternal indication will not end at the 120 days, it will continue until the end of the pregnancy. If the mother's health or life is threatened by the pregnancy, abortion is always permitted up until the day of delivery, because keeping the trunk of the tree takes priority or precedence over the branches. She is the trunk and the fetus is the branch. And if you have to choose between the trunk and the branch, you keep the trunk and you cut off the branch. If you have a sick branch, you don't sacrifice the whole tree for the sick branch. That is the rationale of the scholars. So up until the day of delivery, if there is a maternal indication, meaning that it's risky for the mother's health or life, then abortion may be permitted. If it is for a fetal indication, it is between 40 days and 120 days. But what is the fetal indication? It is not that they will tell you that you're a child that may be born without the fifth finger, for instance, or the fifth toe. It is something that is basically incompatible with an established, dignified life. An established life versus like the temporary life, coming off alive and then needing life support afterwards and death and so on. But a dignified life, if Keep in mind, someone could be blind and lead one of the most dignified lives ever. Abdullah ibn Maktoum is better than any one of us. He has a higher station than any one of us. We're talking about someone who has like trisomy 18, for instance. Extreme disability, extreme, it is not just, it's not compatible with dignified life. Well, yeah.
Jazakallah khairan, everybody. Whoever thinks I skipped their question, you might be right, but it wasn't only your question. I swear it wasn't only your question. You have no idea how many questions are in front of me right now, and we left a bunch of them for a bunch of different reasons. But again, the Sheikh is at your service. If you want to come and discuss them here, if you really genuinely want answers to them, he's available, inshallah azza wa jal. I know he prefers that over whatever dinner we want to take him to after. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continue to bless the Sheikh. And I'm going to ask him now for one final word of advice, and I'm going to give out the prizes. For anyone that has an issue, is afraid to ask, for whatever reason, just one final word of advice for everybody regarding this subject.
I have extreme fear from sort of misrepresenting or not properly representing my religion. If you are not convinced of any of my answers or arguments, look for another answer. Keep in mind that I was under extreme pressure, like time-wise. Ask me later, but if I were unable to convince you, look for another person to convince you. Don't sit on any little doubt in your heart concerning your deed. That is catastrophic. Don't sit on it. Continue to ask other people. If you don't convinced by one, you will find someone else to convince you. Because the argument, the Islamic argument, it is truly supreme. It is from God. It is truly supreme. If one sheikh cannot communicate it properly, another one will be able to. And it is very relative, because someone may be able to communicate it properly to one individual, but not the other, and so on. But look for the one that can communicate it properly to you, because there will be one, inshallah. Jazakumullah khairan. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Allah bless our Shaykh and continue to allow us to benefit from him and show gratefulness for him. Say Ameen. And set his tongue and his heart and his da'wah right to extend his life and increase his benefit and allow him to have a good stamp in this world before he leaves it. Allahumma Ameen. Some of these, the Shaykh has 10 books here that somebody donated. The Shaykh's Fiqh of Worship books. There is, and he actually signed them off to give them to 10 students, inshallah, depending on your answers to these questions. So we're going to ask 5 questions to the brothers, 5 questions to the sisters. The Shaykh's pick. Tfadal, Shaykhna. Tfadal. I think brothers and sisters, and you grade with the answer is worthy of a book, inshallah. The 5 objectives of Sharia will be the first question.
Okay, the 5 objectives are religious commitment, sacredness of life, property, intellect, and honor and wisdom.
That's good.
Jazakumullah khairan. Is that right? Alhamdulillah. Tfadal, you can give them. You meant to man. Jazakallah khairan. Sheikh, can I help with some questions? طيب, what's the difference between Sharia and Fiqh, brothers? Sheikh. I'll be biased. You don't know them, so you're not going to be biased. He raised his hand first, to be honest. He did pick up his hand first. I don't know him, he doesn't owe me any money, nothing.
So the difference between Sharia and Fiqh is Sharia is the rules of Allah that Allah has set down, and they are supreme in all that they can be. Fiqh is the understanding and interpretation by the scholars of the Sharia, and incorporates a human factor that must be taken into account. And whenever the Fiqh and Sharia overlap in their correctness, then the Fiqh becomes Sharia. Otherwise, the Fiqh...
There goes like 3 other questions. That's it. Is it sufficient, Chef? Those are the sisters. Those are the sisters' books. Akhi, come take your book. Next question for the sisters. Out of the 5, the only 5 prescribed punishments in the entirety of the Sharia. Name 3 of them. Remember we said there was only 5? Right? The Sharia is not the legal, not just the penal code. In the penal code is only 5 rules, 3 acts that are punishable, right, of those 5. What do they stand for?
You should give this to the brothers.
This one's for the brothers, right?
They did one that's 5, which is more knowledge.
Because the rulings favor the women.
I just
No, she has an answer, right? You have an answer?
me.
I don't know. Did you have your hand up?
I did.
Sure.
So the wisdom behind the hudud is that
No, 3 acts that warrant the had.
zina,
3 crimes, yes.
zina, murder, and apostasy in a Muslim country.
What was the third one?
Apostasy.
That's one of the 5 you intended?
No.
It's not. It's discretionary according to the Sharia.
Yeah. But
She's right according to
my madhab is not binding to you. My madhab is that apostasy is not a had, it's a discretionary punishment, which gives room, because the Prophet ﷺ did not apply. We don't know that, there is no authentic tradition, although the Prophet instructed people to apply this punishment, but there is no authentic tradition that he applied it on any one of the apostates during his time. And there are certain incidents where people committed apostasy and the punishment was not applied, indicating that it is not a had. Even if the Qudama said it is not a had, because you could repent from apostasy, you cannot repent from a had. After you commit a had and you repent, you will still be punishable. But if you commit apostasy and you repent, no one will punish you because you repented, which is different from the hudud. So even though I'm not arguing about the punishment, I'm arguing about whether it is a discretionary punishment or a had. You said murder is murder is not a had, but I will accept it from you. Murder is not a had. Murder belongs to the laws of retaliation, qisas, not hudud. Hudud are 5 prescribed punishments. There is had, is zina and qazf, if you remember them together. So zina and false accusation of zina. That's 2 out of the way. Theft and haraba will get you 2 out of the way, because haraba, which is basically,
Is it piracy?
Piracy, yes. It is like highwaymen attacking people and raping, killing, stealing, all of that stuff. Those stuff. And theft. So you remember these 2 together? And wine gets you into all of the trouble,
It'll cause you to do the other 4. Wine, that's just how you remember. The 5th is wine. It leads.
It cause you to do the rest. Murder belongs to a different set of laws, which is called retribution or retaliation. Qisas. But we'll consider it right now.
More questions. Sharia, linguistically, the very first question we asked, what does Sharia mean linguistically? Only one hand, first hand up. Sam, go for it.
No, let one of the guys try.
You're not getting a vote. For your philanthropy, you're not getting a vote.
Sharia is the path or the way. To water.
Okay.
You asked about the linguistic?
Yeah, yes. Linguistically, Jazakallah khairan. Sisters, what we talk about? When is the only time a pregnancy can be aborted after 120 days?
What do you want to do?
Who was the first hand here?
Be honest. She might have been older. Wow.
You might have done?
Yeah.
You go ahead, sister. Maternal indication.
Where's the, you ran away with the rest of the
So maternal indication here means that the pregnancy basically poses risk to the health or the life of the mother. Okay. So the two things that you will say first to comfort the people about our, Sharia in America. The two things that you will say first to comfort the people about what we intend to do with Sharia in America.
Can I read from my notes?
Yeah.
Okay.
Don't read from your notes.
The first thing is you want to tell them that the Sharia itself is not necessarily binding as a minority. Okay, this is the second thing. As a minority population, we do not seek to enforce the Sharia on an unwilling majority. I think that was the second. That was the first one.
Yeah.
And the second one is that a majority. Was that the same? I'm confused.
Can you get a book? What was the question again?
What are the first two things? Tell someone who feels that the Muslims are threatening their civilization because they believe in Sharia living amongst them. Any other brothers?
People also want to know what else. Like people want,
You're not going to apply it on me.
You want to comfort them that you're also complying with their laws. Because if they feel that a sector of their society is not complying with the laws of the land, that could be concerning, disturbing to a lot of people. Yeah.
Well, so I guess back to the sisters. A book for that one, and we give them the book.
Okay, half.
Sisters, what is the four layers, right, of Sharia, meaning of interpretations, opinions? What is the only, okay, there we go. She has it already.
Esoteric or eccentric?
That wasn't my question. What is the only layer of interpretation where you should be assertive? Unanimous agreement. Tabarakallah. Jazakallah khairan. Give her her book. Brothers with the rest?
The positions of the scholars, remember, it's either an esoteric position like some scholars. All of this scholarly, like I said, it's not my aunt's position. It's scholarly position, mujtahideen positions. Could be esoteric, like, very eccentric, not accepted by the very, very vast majority, and that doesn't have like a good foundation and the revelation stuff. Minority, majority, unanimous agreement. You're assertively defending the unanimous agreement. Okay.
You have a question for me? I already have a book though.
No, we could ask the brothers.
Why can't you just live by justice?
Huh?
Why can't you just live by universal truths? What's the reason for Sharia? Make Sharia unique.
Yeah, that's a good question. So why can't we live by, the triad of justice, truth, and beauty? Or wait a second. Truth, goodness, and beauty. Haq, khayr, jamal. The philosophical triad. Say them. Yes. Or here's the question.
I'll donate.
Huh? I'll give it yes.
It's because it's human definitions and people don't have like a objective way to define those things. It has to come from that. And
Okay.
changes from society to society. Different cultures have different.
I understand. So you different cultures have different norms. So you're saying that there are human biases that identify. There are human biases. Okay. What else in addition to the human biases?
The divine law
is from God. So that precedes anything that has human deficiency.
Yeah, but so it's human biases in defining those values. Yeah.
Because science can't actually find a way to
test to morality.
Science cannot find a way, but we're talking about the atheist and situational morality and stuff. But the other thing is, yes, yeah.
Okay, it's subjective to interpretations of the different kinds of people place and errors. So that's why you do not have universal justice, because people interpret justice differently. So
well, that is the same thing here. We're saying that human bias, yes.
I think you said besides the human biases, every reasonable system aspires for these three goals. We don't disagree on that. What we disagree on is on how we can achieve it.
How to get there, absolutely. The roadmap. Because all the people throughout the world agree. Justice, beauty, goodness, fraternity, equality, brotherhood, all of the good things. But they disagree over how to get there. These are good ends by agreement, by unanimity among all mankind. How do we get there? Needs divine guidance. And keep in mind, in Islam, when we talk about Sharia, the Sharia is flexible. It leaves a lot of room for human creativity. Don't think that the Sharia is going to tell us how to do everything and, like the details of all of the financial transactions. The Sharia just tells us guidelines. Avoid excessive risk taking, avoid usury, avoid cheating and inequity. Guidelines to prevent us from our own biases and prejudices, to prevent us from overstepping the limits and from aggression. But in economics, there is so much room for human, thought and human intellect to basically show creativity and genuine creativity. So the Sharia will not limit any of that, but the Sharia will just provide milestones on the sides of the path. Don't get there. This is going to cause you ruin. Even if you don't see it, I see it as God. I am warning you that this path leads to your ruin. That's it. But there is so much room for it.
If you don't get rid of these books, by the way, they're not going to go. So I don't have any more questions. Can you pass this back? Just keep it. I need to get rid of them. They're going to throw us out of this room.
I have two questions.
Off topic a little bit. A question
for the crowd.
Yeah.
Go for it.
So Sheikh Hatim mentioned one presidential candidate who said, I put myself as Christian first and American second. There was another person running for president who was asked on national television, do you put the Constitution or the Bible first? And he said it depends, which was very hypocritical because they get on Muslims anytime a Muslim just tries to be a Muslim. Can somebody name who this person was?
Jeb Bush.
You pick, Sheikh. You pick who answers.
You can't win a book on Sharia and political. Go for it.
No. Who said that? Hang on. No, it's not. Guys, don't scream. Too many people are screaming. I don't know who said that. What did you say? Ben Carson.
Sir, truth, beauty, justice. Breathe in, breathe out. Is that all? Our books are done? Do you have one more question for the sisters?
You cannot be logical if you say anything else. Keep in mind, I want to know how do people make laws? How do people make laws? How do people, not laws, how do people amend the Constitution? By a 2/3 majority, right? How do people make laws? By a simple majority. How do people amend the Constitution? By a 2/3 majority. So, by definition, there is almost 1/3 in disagreement, and it was still added to the Constitution. So almost 1/3 were still in disagreement. Do you want to convince them of the wisdom of the position they were opposing yesterday because it was just added to the Constitution today, all you could ask of them is to comply. That's it. Otherwise, you would be extremely irrational. You have 1/3 of your congressmen and women disagreeing with a certain position. They were overruled by 2/3. It was added to the Constitution. Do you want to tell them tomorrow that you should be convinced that whatever position that you were convinced of yesterday is inferior, logically, rationally inferior? No, that is completely illogical. What you want to tell them is, now since it became part of the Constitution, you should comply. Now since it became a law, now you should comply. And that is what we're saying we will do. We will comply. But don't ask me to be internally convinced of the superiority or the wisdom of everything that became law because of a simple majority of people in the Congress.
We have one final book and everyone has to get out. If you have one question, sisters? No, one book is going to the club room, they said.
Oh, okay.
You can order it, go to iiph.com, guys. Order the book. Okay.
So one on the brothers and sisters side.
Okay, one on the brothers and on the sisters side. We still have one more book though.
I'll take that. Just throw it
Okay, how dare you. It's signed by Sheikh Hatim and a special dua is
Can I
made.
propose another question, non-political?
I have 2 questions related to this topic. I think you're right.
No, go ahead.
All right, one you can ask is, what did the 11th century jurists say, the quote that Muhammad al-Shinawi said? And the other question, what are the 2 parts of the deterrence theory?
2 parts of it?
Deterrence theory, 2 limbs of the deterrence theory.
The 2 limbs of the deterrence theory. Okay, okay, you have
The severity of the punishment and the chance of getting caught.
correct.
No, that's the sisters club room. That's the whole given the book. Is that the law? Did everybody enjoy the event? I hope it touched. I hope you realize that we're just tipping the iceberg. That's all we wanted to do this evening. Please be admitted.